What happened when an undercover CEO walked into his own luxury retreat and discovered his guests were being treated like second-class citizens? Welcome, thoughtful and compassionate viewers. You have an eye for stories that truly matter. Today's tale isn't just about wellness or wealth. It's about empathy, leadership, and the quiet courage to Dr. Adrian Wells sat alone in his office at the edge of Serenity Haven, the sprawling wellness retreat he had built from a dream into a destination. Outside, the mountain breeze rustled the pine trees, but inside, Adrian's mind was a storm. The tablet in his hands glowed with harsh headlines and harsher reviews. One caught his eye immediately. Felt like a second-class citizen in a first-class spa. Another, staff ignored me because I wasn't rich enough to matter. As he scrolled, the pattern became undeniable. Multiple guests reported being dismissed, overlooked, and even humiliated. Most of them staying in the community care or standard tier housing. One particularly devastating entry described an elderly woman with arthritis whose request for assistance with mobility was left unanswered for 2 days because the staff was busy tending to premium guests. Adrian felt the breath leave his chest. This wasn't just bad service. It was a betrayal. Serenity Haven was meant to be a sanctuary, a place where healing was available to all. That had been the founding vision, rooted in the memory of his own mother, who had once struggled to afford dignified care. But now, with the retreat expanding, new investors, and a growing list of VIP packages, Adrian couldn't deny the truth. Somewhere along the way, the mission had lost its soul. He thought of the quarterly board meetings, where executives pushed for higher-tier offerings and revenue-per-guest metrics, of the glossy marketing campaigns promising luxury healing, and how none of them featured the retreat's more modest wings. He had trusted others to preserve the values, while he focused on growth. But now he saw how that trust had been misplaced. Adrian's jaw tightened as he stared out at the picturesque landscape beyond the glass wall of his office. It looked peaceful. But the reality inside the walls of Serenity Haven was far from serene. He couldn't fix this with a memo or a motivational speech. He needed to see it for himself, to understand how deep the rot had spread. Slowly, a wild idea formed in his mind, one that was equal parts reckless and necessary. He would become a patient, not as Dr. Wells' founder and CEO, but as someone no one would recognize. Someone the system had no reason to impress, and from there, he would discover the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it would be. 3 days later, Adrian Wells stood in front of the main gates of Serenity Haven, not as its founder, but as Jonas Carter, a soft-spoken, middle-aged man recently awarded a low-income community wellness scholarship. His once polished hair was now uneven and shaggy, dyed a dull brown. A pair of thick-rimmed glasses sat crookedly on his nose. His posture was slouched, his clothes thrifted, wrinkled, and too large, just convincing enough to portray someone who had slipped through life's crack. The transformation had taken hours of careful preparation, aided by his old friend Victor Chan, a corporate security expert who had helped him craft a believable backstory. Jonas Carter, former hospital janitor recovering from burnout and looking for peace. It was the perfect cover, humble, unassuming, invisible. As Jonas approached the check-in desk, he saw Serenity Haven through a new lens. Gone were the elegant lobbies and panoramic views shown in brochures. The check-in desk for Tier 1 guests was a narrow alcove off to the side, separated from the grand marble foyer where a concierge in a tailored suit handed lavender towels to a smiling couple checking into the grand villa. A receptionist at the Tier 1 station barely looked up from her screen. "Name?" she asked flatly. "Jonas Carter," Adrian said in a low, tired voice. She tapped her keyboard, printed a keycard, and slid it across the desk without eye contact. "Room 214B, shared housing. You'll find a map in your welcome folder." No drink, no welcome, no tour. Adrian followed the map down a dimly lit hallway, past the luxury wing, and into the more modest quarters tucked behind the retreat's main spa. The air grew colder, the walls plainer. Room 214B was a shared space. 2 twin beds, a laminated rules sheet, and a bathroom that looked functional at best. He set down his small duffel bag and sat on the edge of the bed, absorbing the silence. Outside, he could hear laughter, champagne flutes clinking on balconies, the faint strum of live guitar music drifting from the cliffside restaurant reserved for premium guests. But in this corner of Serenity Haven, no one greeted him. No one offered help. No one cared. Adrian exhaled slowly. This was exactly what he needed. This was where the truth lived. Adrian quickly learned that Serenity Haven operated on two entirely different frequencies. One for the elite and one for everyone else. During his first group orientation, held in a dim room with plastic chairs and a broken ceiling fan, he was handed a faded pamphlet that read, "Find your peace, one breath at a time." Meanwhile, a group of diamond-tier guests were whisked away in a luxury golf cart caravan toward a private eucalyptus-scented yoga dome overlooking the valley. Meals told the same story. While he stood in line for bland lentils and boiled kale at the general dining hall, he overheard a concierge reciting a hand-curated vegan tasting menu to a guest from the penthouse villas. The disparities weren't subtle, they were institutional. During a meditation session for standard guests, the instructor barely made eye contact and rushed through the session. Adrian noticed a woman in the back quietly wiping tears from her eyes, ignored by both staff and participants. No one offered tissues, no one asked if she was okay. Later, when Adrian passed the glass-walled VIP spa, he saw staff practically bending over backward to refill herbal teas and offer personalized aromatherapy consultations to guests lounging in heated robes. The clearest moment came when he met Mr. Leonard Green, an elderly man with a cane who shuffled into the shared dining hall looking visibly distressed. "Excuse me," Leonard said to a passing staff member, "my shower chair still isn't fixed. It's been 2 days." The staffer gave a tight-lipped smile and replied, "We'll check again when the premium suites are done with their repairs." Then she disappeared. Adrian helped Leonard back to his table, a pit forming in his stomach. "This place used to feel like a blessing," Leonard muttered. "Now, unless you've got a gold badge, you're just clutter." Adrian didn't respond. He couldn't. The words were too true, too sharp. The warmth and equality his retreat had promised were a mirage, available only to those who could afford it. Everyone else was left behind, hidden in the shadow of imported quartz walls and five-star silence. The slogan echoed in Adrian's mind like a cruel joke. Every guest matters. But here, that clearly wasn't the case. Adrian's next step in understanding the retreat's true inner workings came through Serenity Haven's Wellness for Service program, a cost-saving option offered to lower-tier guests who exchanged part of their stay for light custodial work. It was the perfect cover. Assigned to the early morning cleaning shift, Adrian donned a gray uniform with a faded name patch that read Jonas, and began scrubbing steam rooms, folding towels, and vacuuming meditation mats before dawn. It was grueling work, made worse by the way higher-level staff ignored or barked orders at him. But amidst the exhaustion, he found an unexpected ally, Elise Tran, a wellness coordinator who oversaw the therapy room upkeep and assisted with guest transitions between sessions. Elise was efficient, kind, and unlike most, didn't treat Adrian like he was invisible. When he struggled with a mop bucket on his first shift, she quietly stepped in and showed him the trick to keeping the floors streak-free. "The secret is drying as you go," she whispered, smiling. "Saves time, saves slips." Over the next few days, they fell into a quiet rhythm. Adrian admired the way she treated all guests equally, regardless of wristband color. She offered warm greetings to elderly patients, took the time to answer confused first-timers, and even stepped in to comfort a panicked guest having a mild anxiety attack despite being off the clock. One morning, while restocking lavender oil in the therapy wing, Elise opened up. "It didn't used to be like this," she said, voice low. "We used to treat everyone with care. Now, it's all performance. Smiles for the penthouses, shrugs for everyone else. We're told to prioritize revenue-driving touchpoints," she rolled her eyes. "I didn't sign up to be a concierge for influencers." Adrian listened, letting her words fill the spaces he'd tried to ignore. "Why don't you say something?" he asked. Elise hesitated. "Because people who raise their voices around here usually don't stay long." She returned to sorting oils, but her posture said more than her words. In Elise, Adrian saw a mirror of his own original intent, care without conditions. But unlike him, she didn't have power, only persistence. and that made her one of the most valuable people in the building. He realized then, if change was coming, it would need to start with voices like hers, and people finally willing to listen. The breaking point came late one night when the retreat was cloaked in quiet and most guests had retired to their rooms. A sudden electrical fault plunged the lower decks into darkness. No lights, no air circulation, and no emergency response for the economy tier dormitories. The glow from Adrian's emergency flashlight sliced through the pitch-black hallway as he stepped out of his shared room to the sound of confused voices and panicked murmurs. Down the hall, he spotted Mr. Leonard Green, the elderly guest, clutching a wall and shuffling blindly in the dark, one hand outstretched, his cane clattering against the tiles. "Mr. Green!" Adrian called, hurrying to his side. Leonard's breath was shallow, his forehead clammy. "Can't see a damn thing," he wheezed. "No one's come." Adrian guided him to a nearby bench, checking his pulse with practiced calm. Then, voices from the stairwell caught his attention, two staff members whispering and laughing. "Management says focus on the upper villa wing," one said. "Forget the scholarship folks, they'll survive." Adrian clenched his jaw. Not only had lower-tier guests been abandoned, but there was also open mockery of their safety. That's when Elise appeared, flashlight in hand, eyes fierce. "We're on our own," she said, already helping another guest navigate toward the emergency exit. "They redirected all emergency response teams upstairs, said priority goes to premium guests first." At that moment, the facade cracked completely. Adrian spent the next hour navigating dark hallways with Elise, guiding frightened guests to safety while the higher decks glowed faintly with generator power. No managers came, no nurses appeared. Standard-tier guests were left to fend for themselves. He passed a woman sitting alone in her room, hugging her knees. Another couple held up phone lights while comforting their child. There were no fire alarms, no system messages, just silence and shadows. Back near the stairwell, Adrian overheard Ms. Rhonda Blackwell berating a junior staffer. "Why are you still down here?" she snapped. "You think the board's going to care about some pensioners in bunk beds? Get upstairs where it counts." The words sliced through him like a blade. Later that night, after the power returned, Adrian sat in the dark corner of the service hallway, his mind racing. This wasn't just an oversight. It was a culture of disregard, one that had infected the very core of Serenity Haven. And he now knew without any doubt that it was time to expose the rot. By sunrise, Dr. Adrian Wells was done hiding. Gone were the slouched posture, the janitor's uniform, and the borrowed name of Jonas Carter. He stood at the front of Serenity Haven's morning operations meeting in a crisp navy blazer, freshly shaven, his usual quiet confidence returning with every passing second. The room was packed. Supervisors, wellness coordinators, and administrative leads gathered around the polished conference table, still groggy from the previous night's chaos. At the head sat Ms. Rhonda Blackwell, coffee in hand, already mid-complaint about the lower deck disorder. She stopped mid-sentence when she saw him. "I appreciate everyone coming in early," Adrian began, his voice calm but razor sharp. "But before we begin today's agenda, there's something I need to clarify." He pulled off his ID badge and tossed it onto the table. "My name isn't Jonas Carter. It's Dr. Adrian Wells. I built this place." Gasps rippled across the room. Rhonda's cup froze mid-air. A few staff exchanged stunned glances. Elise Tran, standing near the doorway, blinked in disbelief. "For the past week," Adrian continued, "I've lived among the guests you overlook. I've eaten the lentils you serve without seasoning, walked the halls ignored by staff, and watched an elderly man nearly collapse waiting for a basic repair." His tone never rose, but each word struck like a drumbeat. "I've seen who gets prioritized, and I've seen who gets forgotten." He turned to the large screen at the front of the room and with one tap on his tablet, projected a slideshow of notes, surveillance images, and anonymized transcripts. They included delayed maintenance tickets, demeaning supervisor messages, and even an audio clip of Rhonda dismissing the blackout response with a joke about natural selection. Rhonda rose from her chair. "Dr. Wells, if this is some kind of setup?" Adrian didn't flinch. "This is a reckoning." He turned back to the staff. "Effective immediately, Ms. Rhonda Blackwell is relieved of her duties. Others, who enabled or perpetuated this system of discrimination, will face reviews and disciplinary action. But more than that, Serenity Haven will change. He paused, looking at Elise, who still stood frozen at the back of the room. Because amidst all this, I also saw hope. I saw integrity. I saw what this retreat is still capable of being, thanks to people who showed empathy when no one was watching. Silence filled the room, not from fear, but awe. For the first time in a long while, the retreat wasn't being managed from a boardroom. It was being led. The room remained still after Adrian's announcement, a heavy silence hanging in the air as staff processed the shift that had just taken place. Then, turning to the back of the room, Adrian's voice softened. "Elise Tran," he said, eyes meeting hers with unwavering sincerity, "you are the reason I didn't shut this retreat down completely." Elise froze, stunned. "You treated every guest with dignity, even when others told you not to bother. You led with compassion, without needing a title to do it." He reached into his bag and pulled out a small folder, placing it on the table in front of her. "Effective immediately, I'm promoting you to Director of Guest Experience." Elise's hand trembled as she opened the folder, her eyes flicking over the offer letter. "I don't know what to say," she stammered. "Say yes," Adrian replied, a rare smile tugging at the corner of his mouth, "because this place needs people like you leading it." Applause began, hesitant at first, then growing stronger. Elise's fellow staff members, many of whom had silently admired her efforts, clapped with genuine respect. For once, recognition had found its rightful place. Adrian turned back to the group. "And this is only the beginning. We're instituting an anonymous reporting system for staff, restructuring our tier system, and shifting our incentives to reward empathy, not just efficiency." He made it clear that anyone who had participated in the mistreatment would be reviewed, but also that everyone had a chance to grow under the new model. Outside the glass walls of the conference room, the retreat looked the same: sunlight on stone paths, the hum of fountains, wind in the trees. But inside, something fundamental had shifted. The message was clear: kindness was no longer optional. And for the first time in a long while, the team saw that those who had led with heart were finally rising. In the weeks that followed, Serenity Haven began to feel like a new place, not because the architecture changed or the services were upgraded, but because dignity became part of its foundation again. Under Elise Tran's leadership, the retreat rolled out a bold new initiative called the Dignity Mandate. Every guest, regardless of their package tier, would now receive the same baseline level of care, respect, and emergency response. Therapy sessions were restructured so that shared experiences included guests from all backgrounds, breaking down the invisible walls between the standard dorms and the luxury villas. Meals were redesigned to be identical in portion and quality across dining halls. The spa stopped offering exclusive treatments reserved for Diamond members, opening their doors to all, with Elise overseeing equitable scheduling and fair waitlists. For many long-term staff, the changes came with resistance. A few who had grown used to tipping scales toward the wealthy pushed back, muttering about wasting time on guests who don't spend. But as Adrian quietly walked the halls, checking in on guests and custodial workers alike, he began to see the shift. A junior therapist stayed after hours to help a nervous first-timer through a breathing exercise. A guest in a shared room received help from a concierge who had previously worked exclusively in the premium wing. And most importantly, people, guests, and staff began to look one another in the eye again. Even former critics returned, including Mr. Leonard Green, who was offered a fully accessible suite and a handwritten apology. "I don't know what happened," Leonard had said with a smile, "but I finally feel like a guest again, not a ghost." The treat introduced a new feedback loop where staff could submit weekly insights about overlooked needs or moments of kindness they'd witnessed. These stories were read aloud during Friday debriefs, turning what had once been sterile corporate meetings into genuine celebrations of humanity. Elise made it a point to highlight even the smallest gestures: a folded towel placed thoughtfully, a shared umbrella during a sudden downpour. Serenity Haven hadn't changed overnight, but the ship had turned. And now, with dignity as its compass, it was sailing in the right direction. By the end of the second month, Serenity Haven was no longer coasting on image, it was anchored in purpose. Dr. Adrian Wells, once a distant figure confined to quarterly updates and polished presentations, now made regular rounds, not in a tailored suit but in rolled sleeves and walking shoes. He greeted guests by name, chatted with custodial staff over coffee, and sat in on group therapy circles as a participant, not a figurehead. The change in energy was palpable. Staff who had once clocked in and out with detached efficiency now lingered after hours to debrief with one another, to share small victories or brainstorm better ways to serve their guests. Elise, now firmly established in her leadership role, launched a new team initiative called Heartline, a mentorship program where senior staff were paired with newer hires to model not just policy, but compassion. "We're not just teaching routines," she said during one onboarding. "We're teaching people how to show up for each other." From wellness coordinators to kitchen staff, everyone now attended empathy-based training designed to dismantle the toxic hierarchy that had once plagued the retreat. Adrian visited Leonard Green one afternoon, who now occupied a newly renovated accessible suite near the gardens. They walked together, slowly, with Leonard's cane tapping softly against the stone path, and shared a quiet moment under the shade of a blooming dogwood. "Feels different now," Leonard said, "like we're all actually supposed to be here." That moment stayed with Adrian, because the retreat was finally returning to the mission that had birthed it: healing without condition, service without bias, and care that treated everyone, regardless of their wallet size, as worthy. And this time, it wasn't just his dream. It was everyone's. Standing on the quiet overlook just beyond the main lodge, Dr. Adrian Wells let the wind move through his coat as he watched the sun dip below the treetops. The retreat behind him was alive, guests strolling through the gardens, soft laughter rising from the shared fire pit, a staff member gently guiding an elderly guest toward the evening meditation. He thought back to that first night of darkness, the blackout that revealed far more than a faulty circuit. It had exposed a hierarchy that had crept in silently, disguised as efficiency and revenue, but now those cracks had become pathways to something stronger. Staff had learned to speak up, to lead with their hearts. Guests, once divided by tier, now shared meals, stories, even healing. And Elise, once overlooked, had become a quiet force of culture, not just policy. Adrian knew there was still work ahead. No system changed overnight. But the ship was no longer drifting. It had direction, purpose, humanity. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded note, one of the first written testimonials from a guest since the changes began. It simply read, "Thank you for making me feel like I belonged. I hadn't felt that in years." Adrian smiled faintly. Serenity wasn't found in silence or luxury. It was found in being seen. And now finally, Serenahaven was seeing everyone. The story of Dr. Adrian Wells and Serenity Haven teaches a profound lesson about the soul of leadership and the true meaning of care. No matter how successful an organization becomes, it risks losing its purpose when it forgets the people it was built to serve. Adrian's undercover journey revealed a system that had slowly devalued compassion in favor of profit, where those without privilege were quietly pushed aside. But instead of issuing top-down orders, he chose empathy, proximity, and direct experience to guide reform. Through his eyes, we see that change doesn't start with policy. It starts with people, with listening, with standing beside those who are overlooked. His decision to recognize and uplift frontline staff like Elise and to hold others accountable shows that dignity and equity must be foundational, not optional extras. The retreat's transformation came not from rebranding or luxury upgrades, but from restoring a culture where every individual, guest, or staff mattered equally. The lesson is clear. True healing spaces are not defined by marble floors or scented oils, but by the sincerity of the hands that serve within them. Leadership rooted in humility and heart can rebuild anything, even trust. And that is where real wellness begins.